Hello everyone and welcome back to Old Spook Lane Creepy Chats, where we're taking a look into spooky stop motion animated films. I am Patricia.
And my name is Arun.
And today we're going to be talking about Frankenweenie.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about the 2012 movie. However, I think before we get into that, I think we need to also discuss the 1984 version of Frankenweenie, which was Tim Burton's side creation, which kind of got him fired from Disney.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people are thinking, wait a minute, Tim Burton worked at Disney at one point? Yeah, he did in 1979, where he was coming into Walt Disney Animation and he wanted to learn the ropes about wanting to become an animator and a filmmaker because of his passion for it. And he hated working for Disney because he found it to be so rigid. Like the fact that they told him that they didn't want him to deviate from the Disney style, that he had to like be pretty much on point with what they were doing. And yeah, I mean, he started getting away from all of that when he was creating some of his shorts. I mean, there was Vincent, and then there was also the one that we're going to be talking about, which is Frankenweenie, which was released as a short film in 1984. And so yeah, Frankenweenie is about a young boy named Victor Frankenstein who has a bull terrier named Sparky, whom he absolutely loves. And one day Sparky gets hit by a car and is killed, and Victor learns about electrical impulses in muscles from his science class, and he decides, can he do the same thing with reviving Sparky to life? And so after a lot of experimentation, he's able to bring back Sparky from the dead. And yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of wacky hijinks that are ensued.
Yeah, and so this takes inspiration, by the way, both 1984 and 2012 versions of Frankenweenie. They take a homage, effectively, to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which obviously is was then created itself into the classic horror movie made in 1931.
Yeah.
And so the Frankenweenie covers some very interesting topic, which is just, it's grief and it's, the acceptance of loss, of the fact that, Sparky has been hit by a car and he is dead and he's no longer coming back, but Victor is so determined to get Sparky back into his life that he's willing to dig him up from the pet cemetery, do science experiments onto him and effectively bring him back from the dead.
Yeah.
So it means that this person who means, or thing that means a lot to you, is now no longer there, and it is a child coping with that grief, the fact that they are no longer going to be in their life. It's interesting because, Sesame Street, out of all things, also sort of covered this topic as well, obviously because Mr. Hooper, as we know, passed away during the production of the show, and they needed to explain his absence from the show.
Yes.
And so they decided just to go with it and just said, look, he has passed away, and he sadly is not going to longer be with us anymore. And you had Big Bird going through the motion like, oh no, we know Mr. Hooper's not going back. Now, I'm not suggesting that in Sesame Street that Big Bird dug up Mr. Hooper and then brought him back Frankenstein style. That would be an interesting take on Sesame Street. But I mean, the idea is that it is approaching a topic of a Victor who has lost a very close friend in Sparky the dog, and he's now going through the motions of the fact that what would happen if I brought this character back. into and that ends up being the topic of the movie.
Yeah, so when the short film came out, Disney were appalled by it, saying like, "Oh, this is too scary and it's too dark for Disney," and they fired Tim Burton.
Yeah, not realizing he was way ahead of his time. And,
yeah, very true, because this very short film was seen by a Mr. Paul Rubens, and he thought to himself, wow, I need to know about the guy who directed this film, because, I mean, this is actually really interesting. And so he went over to the after party where he knew one of the actors, Shelley Duvall, who played as the mom. And when, he was asking about, like, who was the director of that short film, it was very good. And then she was, like, shocked and so happy. It's like, oh my gosh, Paul, I know you're making this film. You would be perfect to talk to Tim about it. He's the perfect guy for this film, because Paul Rubens was looking for a director for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and he had called every single director, and he felt that they didn't fit with what he was trying to do. And so why not get an up-and-comer like Tim Burton to direct the film? And let's just say the rest was history, where Tim Burton, after Pee-wee's Big Adventure, went off to do Beetlejuice and Batman and Edward Scissorhands. He became a household name after that. And yeah, it's kind of interesting about how things turn around, where now you go from Disney firing you because they don't understand about your way of expressing art to begging to do art for Disney, where they brought him in for Nightmare Before Christmas and Ed Wood. And then over the next several years, when he was building up his reputation again, around the 2010s, he was brought in to do Alice in Wonderland 1 and 2, and then later on he did Dumbo. But before all of that, they also called him in to go back into his roots and bringing in Frankenweenie into the big screen.
Yeah, and just going back to Frankenweenie itself, and so it's interesting that there is a sort of like, I would say, a bit of a debate. I think that also can be found in this movie as well. Is it ethically sound to bring your dog back to life, effectively, or is it ethically sound to bring anything back to life for that matter? And so I think this, just because it's crazy to think that a kid's imagination can go so far to say, well, this science experiment I saw on a frog, brings the electricity back and the life back into this corpse, but to bring back an entire dog, from that. And so I think there's a lot of imaginative and it's very there's a lot of creativity, I think, into this short that Tim Burton did. And it is frustrating that he got the reaction that he did, because when you really look at Frankenweenie, it is very creative. It is very visually, it is weird and strange, but somewhat pleasing at the same time. It's like, wow, like this is different from what I normally expect. And so when you're seeing like the whole machine being put together, and the fact that Victor is just such a weird kid that is so obsessed with wanting to do this, he kind of throws science and ethics to one side, and wants to, but his whole concentration is bringing back his one and only friend.
Yeah, and again, it's going into what we saw in Frankenstein, in which when Victor Frankenstein was wanting to do a lot of experiments, and he wanted to see if he can be able to bring a dead body back to life, and so he dug up multiple graves and put together lots of body parts to see if he can be able to play God. And so, yeah, I mean, he was able to do it, and then we saw the repercussions of what happens when you're able to do something like that. And
but I mean, it's the reason why I say it's a homage to Frankenstein rather than it actually is like it's a carbon copy for Frankenstein, because Frankenstein's motivations to to bring around the monster are very different from for the reasons Victor wants to bring back Sparky.
Yeah.
So these are are the same sort of methods, I guess you could say, but the goal and the methodology and the drive behind them are totally different.
Yeah, I mean, we saw throughout the beginning of the movie that that is his only friend. Like, he doesn't have anybody else. I mean, sure, he has his parents, but they're off to work, and they also have a lot of other things to do. And Victor is just a regular kid who loves making films, and he loves science, and so Sparky is his only friend, and he doesn't have anybody else. else. And so when Sparky dies in the car crash, I mean, he's absolutely devastated. Like, he lost his only best friend, and so he will do anything to get him back. And so, I mean, are you willing to, break away ethics to raise something from the dead? I mean, are you able to live with yourself with doing that? I mean, is it even the right thing to do? That's actually a really interesting question. But you have to also understand that this is a young kid who just lost his dog, and he's willing to do anything to bring him back.
Here's the thing about this is that when he does bring the dog back, I mean, Sparky gets loose because, dog, and, starts running around the neighborhood. But the funny thing about it is that he's just running around the neighborhood just being a loose dog. He wouldn't be any different from any other dog that's in there. The only difference is that he looks like, a monster because obviously he's been brought back from the dead. And everybody else can't quite believe the fact that, there is this sort of like this really, awkward, and there's a scary looking dog that's now running around the neighborhood, and all of a sudden, like, their prejudices start coming up to the surface, where it's kind of like, well, this is different, this is scary, so therefore I have to react with disgust and disdain, and I have to, say that this thing needs to be shunned from society.
Yeah.
And so there's a really great commentary on this, and the fact that the fact that the society is set up in the same way. So in kind of the same way that we talked about Paranorman in the last episode.
Yeah.
Is that society is set up in a particular way that everybody is happy with, and everybody needs to accept that. And everybody, is there to enforce the social order. And so the fact that Sparky is different from everything else in the social order, for the fact that he is a dog that's been brought back effectively as, like, this Franken, dog that is now come along. Obviously, that is different, that is scary, that is not the normal, and therefore it must be destroyed.
Yeah, and very similar to the classic 1931 film, there's this homage in which, you have this angry mob who runs Sparky over to the windmill. In this case, it's a miniature golf course that also has a windmill, and I
love that, the fact that they put that in there. And by the way, that appears in both versions of the movie.
Yeah,
and, the fact that just on its own exists like that, like it's a great callback to Frankenstein itself, and it's like, I just find that hilarious, actually.
Yeah. So you have Sparky, who runs in there, and then Victor, tries to chase after him, and then, there's the fire that gets lit off accidentally, and then, Victor is basically trapped, and then Sparky saves him, but in the cost of him dying again. And so you have both Victor and his parents, like, really sad that, Sparky is dead once again. And so then you have the idea of, okay, we're just gonna, attach Sparky to all the spark plugs of all the cars that are there, and they're gonna try to jump, Sparky back into life. And so he does come back into life, and then happy endings all around.
Yeah, and this is gonna be either ended two ways. Either it's gonna be like, we're gonna either see Sparky come back to life, or he's gonna travel back to the year 1985, or 1885, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more sense, because considering that,
when this dog hits 88 miles per hour. Oh my God, I was making those jokes throughout the entire time.
You were, yeah.
It's funny, like, it has that quirkiness of Back to the Future, doesn't it? Like, it's this strange idea of, like, saying, it's not, I'm not saying that, Sparky is the equivalent of the DeLorean time machine or anything like that, but it's just like, it's this weird science that you put together, and you can just bring your dog back just by doing that.
Yeah,
and so
sure.
That in itself is kind of crazy. And so
who would have thought that a DeLorean, if you put a flux capacitor in there, it can be able to travel back in time? Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, I mean, like, this is the same era where we thought, like, where cloning techniques would bring back dinosaurs. So, like, it's funny. There were so many good science fiction films, and they weren't just science fiction films, but they also made you think as well, like, the ethics of it all, and how the characters all react, and what the dangerous situation of this whole thing might be. I mean, like, it's funny because in Frankenweenie, there isn't really, like, the only negative that really comes from all of this is from the characters themselves, or reacting to the fact that this dog is now back to life and running around. But I mean, like, Frank, actually calling him Frankenweenie, Sparky himself doesn't really cause any damage or do anything really that is negative.
Yeah, he's just a dog. Yeah.
I mean, I get if you attack somebody. I mean, like, he's like, oh, yeah, I mean, like, that's a problem or anything like that. But that doesn't happen in this movie.
No, it doesn't.
In this short, I should say, before we get into the movie. But,
yeah.
So, I mean, that's pretty much the 1984 Frankenweenie that, sadly got Tim Burton, is giving his marching orders from Disney. But, hey, he made Batman. So, like, and also Pee-wee's Big Adventure. So,
and
like,
Beetlejuice.
And Beetlejuice.
And Edward Scissorhands.
And Edward Scissorhands. So, quite frankly, Disney lost, a good couple of years out of that. And,
yeah.
Imagine if they still had Tim Burton and the Disney Renaissance as well. I think they would have been unbeatable, I think, at that time. Between the late 1980s and the early 1990s.
That would have been interesting. I mean, like, I'm curious about, like, would Beetlejuice and would Edward Scissorhands look similar if they were, done by the Disney Corporation or even by Touchstone?
I don't know, like, but I think if obviously Disney were in their ways at the time, so I mean, like, and also Tim Burton wasn't going to stick around for that, so I think he was happy to leave.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, everybody knows about what happened during the 80s in Disney. Not very pretty, I must say. I mean, it was really rough. Like, after the 9 old men had retired, and you had the new blood taking over, like with Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and various other animators, and trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do now? I mean, we're going to try
I think if they all sat in the boardroom after the Black Cauldron all screamed and cried, I think I probably wouldn't be too surprised. What are we going to do? But anyway.
No, I mean, I hope Great Mouse Detective is at least decent at the box office. Otherwise, we're gonna have to shut down the division.
Well, again, I digress. But so this is the 1984 version. By the way, this is live action. The 1984. And by the way, it's on Disney Plus as well. So surprisingly enough, would you believe it? All these years, after all the turmoil that happened after 1984's Frankenweenie, and now here it is on just hidden in a corner of Disney Plus. It's like, it's like just the movie that Disney thought that all the kids would be scared and urinating themselves over is now there on Disney Plus with no warnings whatsoever. Yeah, well, it's like it just goes to show.
Yeah,
but so we've now that's a live action version of, I guess you could say, of Frankenweenie, the 1984 short.
Yeah.
So I guess now we should go into the 2012 version of this, and so it is done in the Tim Burton stop motion style that we've come accustomed to. Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride. If you've seen Tim Burton stop motion, you sort of know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes in the same direction, and it has the same sort of feel and style of that. The only thing I would say about this is that I don't know if you agree or disagree about this, Patricia. It feels kind of restrictive a little bit. Like, when you're looking at Victor when he's going through like his emotional moments, you kind of can't really tell whether he's smiling or frowning, or like the only way you can really tell if he's going through a difficult moment is when they actually put water onto his eyes and he starts crying and that. And besides that, I mean, like, there's not very much else to kind of go on, unless you hear the vocals of the voice actor, voicing Victor. But I think that's a problem because it doesn't feel as emotive as, say, Nightmare Before Christmas, or as emotive as Corpse Bride, dare I say. Corpse Bride, I thought, was quite, a restricted movie in the way that they could have done the animation with that.
Well, I mean, remember that Nightmare Before Christmas was Henry Selick, and so, I mean, Henry Selick had his way of directing the stop-motion animated film compared to when Tim Burton did Corpse Bride.
Yeah. So, I think what I'm trying to get across is that I think, already off the bat is a little bit of a negative towards this movie. I mean, like, by the way, there's no crime against this movie being black and white. I think, if anything, that adds to the effect of the fact. And by the way, the original 1984 Frankenweenie was all in black and white.
Yeah, it was true,
so, yeah, I mean, if anything, like, the one thing I really do like about the 2012 version is that even though it's stop motion, and even though it's done in, with the Tim Burton style, it's still, tries to say this is the what came before it. This is the pet cemetery. This is the school. This is what our characters look like, and they try their best to continue to keep the aesthetic of what Frankenweenie was. So we had Frankenweenie being a homage to Frankenstein. If anything, this is a homage to the 1984 Frankenweenie itself, but now it's in a larger format.
And the story has been expanded. There's a lot more characters, and they're able to play a lot of the techniques that Tim Burton had become accustomed to with doing Nightmare Before Christmas and Corpse Bride. And yeah, I mean, I would say that if you've seen the short and if you've seen the film simultaneously, you see a lot of homages, and they do a lot of callbacks to the original short a lot.
I think the one thing I'll say is that, though, they try to expand Frankenweenie, and this is the danger I think that a lot of people come across when doing projects like this, because you are taking, in fact, even like TV movies even have dangers of this, because when you justify trying to have a TV movie and or a theatrical production on something which, effectively is like a story that's only like 22 minutes long, plus commercial breaks, you have to like do something really big and do something with your characters, with your story, and with the world around you to justify, I would say, having yourself up on the big screen, because this is a big event that's about to take place, and it's not going to be seen on TV, and it's going to be, very life-changing thing for all our characters. They will not be the same if you decide to do another season of this show. And I would put, Frankenweenie in the same box a little bit as, the fact that there was a 29-minute short that preceded it, because, you're now having to expand this into, you have to make Frankenweenie bigger, you have to make it bolder, you have to make it, you have to add more characters, you have to have, there be massive actions and massive consequences to everything that our characters do. And so that's what I was a little bit worried about when it came to doing this. But I think for the fact that they had to expand a 29-minute story and expand it into, effectively, like, it was an hour and a half, I think it was.
Yeah, it was about an hour and a half.
Something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, like, this wasn't a bad attempt.
No, it wasn't a bad attempt at all. And the fact that it was able to continue on the social commentary that we saw in both the short and even in Frankenstein was also very commendable, too. And also the fact that it continues on with the traditions of something that we saw in Paranorman, in which, like, people are, stuck in their stereotypical ways about, like, following the status quo, and it's either my way or the highway. We saw this with Mr. Burgermeister, who is the mayor of this town, and, he wants everything to be perfect, and there's going to be this massive event that's going to be happening in the town, and, he is pressuring his niece to read off this poem, and, that way, he can be able to be really popular amongst his townspeople, and so he can get the votes, and he can be popular and all that kind of stuff. And you also have a character, Mr. Rosinski, who is the science teacher. He's the one who teaches the students about the electrical currents that we saw in the beginning of the movie, where that's when Victor had the idea of resurrecting his dog Sparky. And, he's seen as like this really strange and really off professor that shouldn't be teaching children. And they have even a town hall meeting to justify firing him because, it's like, this is what our children are learning from him. This is something that is not of the ordinary. We need to get rid of him.
On that basis, there shouldn't be any schools at all. In the fact, like, your kids are going to learn something scary if they walk into a school. And I love the fact that, the science professor walks in and says, "You're all ignorant." And, he doesn't do a very good job, trying to sell over the crowd. But, he's not wrong.
No. And he also gives this really wonderful speech, like, right before he is leaving the school. And he tells Victor about that, there's something that you're passionate about every time that you're doing an experiment. And, the thing about scientists is that we feel and that, we have emotions of how we're able to create something and, never lose it. And I think that that's a really great message about, like, never lose that passion of what you're doing. If you're doing it for the sake of just, trying to get popular or making money, it's not going to work out as well as something as along the lines of you're doing it because you want to do it because you just need to do it. And yeah, I think that the fact that he doesn't stay in the movie for very long is a shame because he was actually a really great character.
He is, and but I think I put him in the same sort of like box. I would say like Mr. Bergstrom, like in The Simpsons. If you remember that episode, from there where where he was like the main part of like of the story in that. But I think in regards to that that story arc, I think, within Frankenweenie, I think he pretty much fulfilled his purpose. I think for Victor, the fact that he gave Victor his confidence and his encouragement and everything along those lines. And and again, like I said before, it's great that they put that storyline in because you've got a whole movie to fill, and you need to create some good story, out of that. And so, Victor's relationship with his science teacher could potentially, fill 22 minutes, as it did, for that Simpsons episode. But obviously, it can't carry the movie. So, but it was a very vital part of it, I thought.
Yeah.
So it was very good that they added that in.
Yeah, and also we have 3 classmates who also want to resurrect their pets so they can be able to win the science fair. So we have Edgar, Bob, and Toshiaki. And they saw the success of Edgar's fish, who Victor helped bring back to life. And, he is invisible. And Edgar says to his classmates, is like, oh, I am going to do this for the science fair. I have an invisible fish that I brought back from the dead. And now they want to be able to resurrect their pets from the dead. And yeah, that doesn't turn out as well as they thought it was going to be. I mean, you have one of them that is turning into Gamera, and the other one who's just basically terrorizing the town and basically breaking everything apart.
I think that was a great commentary that they added in there, is that Victor was the first to effectively bring this to the world, and then all of a sudden there is just a bunch of copycats who want to do their thing. And as someone who who's basically involved with video games for a long time, we've seen that quite a lot of the time. When Nintendo brought out the Virtual Boy and all of a sudden the R-Zone came out from Tiger, and and then when Nintendo released the Game Boy, all of a sudden there was the game.com or the Gamecom, whatever the hell you want to call it. But if anything, it's great commentary on the sort of what we have today. There will be a company that will release a product like the Stanley Cup or something like that, and then all of a sudden there'll just be this barrage of copycats, whether it's on Temu or whether it's on eBay or whether it's on Amazon or anything like that. There'll just be all these companies that will just look at this one company, do this one product, and say that's the future, that's where we're gonna go. Yeah. And now here we got a movie that basically does that kind of social commentary. Victor brings his dog back and everybody else wants to get involved.
Yeah, you remember the 2010s when the Despicable Me came out and the Minions were a popular thing, and everybody
else needed to do their own version of the Minions.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Lorax, and pretty much every other movie that's related to that. Good grief.
Norm of the North.
Norm of the North, yeah, exactly. Everybody else needed their own version of the Minions after that, because you need to have this small little thing. And dare I say, I think I think Nintendo even also tried to do that too. In regards to all the stuff that they've released. So,
and don't forget about Ice Age Collision Course, if you remember, where those little furry creatures that was in the island that Captain Gut was trying to chase away from. They were also kind of Minion-like.
Yeah, there was that. It's just all of a sudden the Minions came out and everything else needs to have their own version of the Minions. If you will.
And in this case, you have the same thing in which we're gonna try to resurrect our pets from the dead, and yeah, that doesn't turn out very well. I mean, in one instance, we have this little girl who has a cat named Mr. Whiskers, and the cat is mixed within a bat, and it becomes a bat cat for reasons.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about this is that, the 1984 science didn't kind of make all that much sense for obvious reasons, because it would just get in the way with the story, but this just goes way out of whack.
Yeah, they were trying to justify as to, why do these kids want to raise their pets back from the dead? Oh, science fair. That's something that kids are doing in school. Science fair.
Yeah, but it's just kind of it kind of gives the impression that, anything that kind of gets struck by lightning all of a sudden comes back to life. It's no, that's not how anything works. I guarantee you, if you put corpses out and put them out in the lightning storm and got them to be struck by lightning, I think they were more likely to explode. It's yeah. So, the thing is that, the thing with Frankenweenie, the original idea of bringing Sparky back to life is just so out there at the moment. It makes everything else sort of look normal. if anything. So that you can sort of kind of get involved in that aspect of the story, just if you don't think about it too hard, which, obviously sometimes me and Patricia are a little bit guilty of when it comes to things like this, but, we'll let this slide.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that last third act where you have all those animals coming back to life was actually pretty amusing. You have, like, the freaking Gamera kaiju monster, you have the hamster, you have the sea monkeys, and...
The one thing I'll say about it is that they didn't seem to be like... I mean, obviously there was the whole... in a way, it kind of makes it annoys me that we had, like, the whole town hall over the science teacher, because, like, it would have been more interesting if they kind of, like, sat down with the fact that, Victor had brought Sparky back to life, and then there was a lot more of a discussion about, like, what had just happened. Like, do you remember, like, it's funny because, remember in Jurassic Park, like, when we were growing up with Jurassic Park, our favorite scenes were, like, the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. But now as we've grown up, like, our favorite scene now has become the fact that when they're all sitting down, like, having dinner and, like, talking about, the ethics and, the whether it's actually appropriate to bring back, species that have, like, not existed on Earth for, like, millions of years,
right,
and bring them into our current, climate where, there's humans dominating the Earth. And, like, you're now bringing back creatures who at one point were the dominant species of the Earth, and now you're bringing them back into this situation.
Yeah, but dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's just like, but I think it's a shame that, and obviously Frankenweenie wasn't going to do this. I mean, obviously it's not Jurassic Park, but I mean, like, it would have been interesting if they had a sit-down moment where they talked about the ethics of what Victor had just done. And I mean, for me, it's kind of like, it's more like everyone so kind of like loses their heads over it, which, by the way, is a normal reaction to have. But I think once that had dissipated, it would have been interesting to say, oh, well, was it really, responsible to bring Sparky back into the situation? It's no longer his time. He tragically died.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that. But is it really responsible to bring him back into this Earth? And whether it's actually his choice to begin with to actually be brought back into this world.
That's true, yeah. It's actually interesting because the stakes of Victor, where, he is missing Sparky so badly, doesn't seem to be as effective compared to the short, where, as we saw in the short, Victor had no friends whatsoever. There were no other kids that he interacted with. But in this one, he went to school and he, he knows Edgar, even though that he's not friends with Edgar, but he actually, knows him and wants to be with him. And you also have the strange girl with the kitty. I mean, she also knows him. And also, another character is... his next door neighbor, Elsa Van Helsing, she also knows him as well. And also, their dogs are friends. And, that kind of like ties into, oh, what's this dog that kind of looks like the Bride of Frankenstein that just shows up literally at like 2 seconds into the short? It's like, okay, now we get to build up this character a lot quicker. So that's where the dog comes from. So yeah, yeah, Victor doesn't seem as lonely in, the movie compared to when he was in the short and, wanting to justify on wanting to bring back Sparky, where, he misses him terribly because that was his only companion. And this one, he has, people that he goes to school with and he respects the science teacher and he has his parents and, his next door neighbor. So, yeah, I mean, like, sure, you're sad that your dog has died in a terrible car accident. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I just don't feel like the emotion compared to when I saw the short. Exactly,
yeah, and so it would have been more interesting, I think, if they had, further discussions about like what was going on within the plot. But I think with I think who it was aimed at, I think with the where we were, and also the fact that it is a very obscure stop motion animation movie. I don't think there was like an attempt to have that. If anything, I think the good points I think of this movie are all in the visuals. I think we're all like in the action. I think within the the weirdness of it itself.
I mean, that's what Tim Burton was known for the longest time, style over substance. And this was supposed to be like his comeback film because a lot of people
I think this was made by Steven Spielberg. I think we'll probably be getting more dialogue, I think, in all of this, but that's not where Tim Burton's at. So.
No, not really, no. Yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be kind of like his comeback film because, throughout the 2000s, a lot of people felt that he was just getting too mainstream and, some of the stuff that he was doing back in the 80s and 90s was starting to lose its luster. I mean, let's see, we had, Planet of the Apes, we had, let's see, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Sweeney Todd. And, at the time he was doing the first Alice in Wonderland movie. So people felt that, Tim Burton has just gone mainstream. It's like now he's just being commercial.
It's funny because, actually, you and I like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And, I like Sweeney Todd. So,
Sweeney Todd was a much more of a bigger hit. And especially since it came out around the time in which when there were a lot of movies based off of musicals that were reaching in theaters. But we talked about this in the Roald Dahl retrospective that at the time that the movie of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory came in theaters, it was a polarizing film that people felt that it wasn't as good as the 1971 film. Anyway, but yeah, so this was supposed to be the movie that was supposed to, go back into his original roots. It's like stop motion, black and white, horror. And yeah, it didn't exactly turn out that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Two camps. I mean, for Disney, this movie came out the same year as Wreck-it Ralph. For stop motion animated films, this movie came out 3 months after Paranorman. And what is the movie from this time period that is stop motion that is still talked about to this day that is even getting a re-release in theaters?
Tell everybody.
Paranorman.
Yep. So.
Yeah, this is a movie that just pretty much came and went for Tim Burton, and then, he was starting to focus on other films for the past couple.
I mean, it came and went for the audience, and it came and went for, probably everybody else on the planet Earth. But, I mean, during award seasons, I think it had a pretty good following. I mean, it won 12 awards and got 50 nominations.
Yeah.
So, it did. A lot of people in the industry, looked at Frankenweenie and did take note and see, oh, wow, there's something here that, we could potentially take inspiration from.
Sure.
So I mean, I think in regards to stop motion, I think in regards to taking something like Frankenweenie, taking a 1984 short and turning it into this movie, I think in regards to the way that they do the characters and the way that they do the story and the way that the aesthetic of it all is put together, I think there's a lesson to be learned here, and I really wish that other TV movies that were based on TV shows took lessons from Frankenweenie about how you should expand your characters and how you should expand your story, everything like that, because good grief, all the movies, we've seen Hey Arnold the movie, we've seen Doug's first movie, we've seen all sorts of wretched things that we're like, oh good grief, why have they done this? I really wish they to be fair, Frankenweenie came out way after all those movies that we talked about back in the time, but I kind of wish that the logic of Frankenweenie kind of existed, 10, 20, 30 years ago, because I guarantee, I think a lot of movies that had taken, something like, Frankenweenie, in a short, and then expanded it onto this movie and knew how, how to make our characters interesting, knew how to make our world interesting, knew how to make our story interesting, and get everybody over there to have a look at this. I really wish that existed, at the time when me and Patricia were talking about some of the movies that based off TV products. So I guarantee, I think we'd all be better off because of it.
We have a lot of the staples of Tim Burton movies coming in to voice the characters. Catherine O'Hara is in this movie, and so is Martin Landau, Winona Ryder, and Christopher Lee. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that we have a lot of these staples in Tim Burton movies, it was nice to actually, see and hear from them again. And, I think that for the most part, Frankenweenie is a pretty solid film. I mean, I'm not going to say anything wrong
I recommend it, yeah.
Yeah, I do recommend
it. Yeah, I would say see the short first, and then after that, see Frankenweenie.
Yeah, that is also a really good suggestion. They're both on Disney Plus, so if you have a Disney Plus subscription, then, yeah, definitely go check it out. And if you actually happen to own Frankenweenie on DVD, either one of them, then, they're pretty affordable in price. I even think that in one of the special features on the 2012 film, you could actually have the 1984 short as a bonus. So there's also that, too, if you want to collect a physical copy of it. But,
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that why this film was pretty overlooked when it first came out. I mean, same year as Wreck-it Ralph, same year as Paranorman. And a lot of people felt that, Tim Burton didn't exactly hit that stride of coming back to his original roots. But he did try. And, his efforts was a pretty solid film. It's just not one that a lot of people really talk about anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah, but, I mean, hopefully, at least in regards to the amount of statues that they collected, I think hopefully he got some sort of recognition.
Yeah, at least there's that we can, at least say that, Frankenweenie took from.
Yeah. So, after resurrecting this from the dead, I mean, what are we going to look at next?
Well, we're going to be concluding the spooky stop motion animated films month on Old Spook Lane Creepy Chats with going back into the work of Henry Selick, and we're going to talk about the Netflix animated film Wendell and Wild.
See you then.
Bye, everyone.